You're with Julian on the Brown Notes, recording for the first time in about 2 months, although I don't know what order I'm going to upload any of this stuff in. Due to getting a new job and not having any time to do any radio or this, a review of John Wick 4. Bless you, Keanu and Chad Stahelski. So I have given them all acclaim. I think I even gave the last one 9, and this one is the fourth in the what now has probably become Keanu Reeves' defining role. Maybe Neo from The Matrix still has that edge, and he's still playing Neo from The Matrix, and I actually thought that was a fairly decent film. It wasn't him or Carrie-Anne Moss that were the problem with The Matrix reboot. It was the new people and Jada Pinkett Smith. Excuse me. That kind of spoiled everything, but it had a lot going for it in other areas, particularly Keanu. Keanu's been saddled with this weird thing, which is that he is in many ways a very clunky actor, but he's an actor that we love to see on the screen. And I feel like as John Wick has progressed, it has relied more and more on the strengths of what he can do well. So we had the first John Wick film, which was Chad Stahelski, who was the stunt double, or at least the stunt coordinator, who worked with Keanu Reeves on the Matrix films, making a homage to a certain kind of film that never quite existed, which was those hard-boiled 70s revenge films. And there's quite a long history of those, going from films like Point Break with Lee Marvin, I think, in the late 60s, Get Carter, where you've got this unknowable, really tough, almost dialogue-free lead character that is indestructible and is, well, virtually killed in Lee Marvin's case, in the film that was remade as Payback with Mel Gibson, who then goes through an organisation, a crime organisation, for payback to what's been done for him. Get Carter was a slightly different twist on the same thing, but you've also got the Killer Elite with, I can't remember his name, the guy with the massive shoulders from The Godfather. Again, he's brutally nearly killed at the start and then works his way in a revenge scenario. John Wick 1 was a combination of that with the kind of athletic, sort of balletic action from Hong Kong action movies like the John Woo films, Killer and Hard Boiled, and a general sort of martial arts aspect. So it was a homage to a kind of film that had never really been made. And I loved it. I loved the first one. It was amazing. And then they just discovered that there's this whole mythology around it of the concierges and the continental hotels in each city being these refuges for a global society of assassins that's just grown and grown to the extent where it's inferred that they run the world's economy. The Table is the highest organisation, the Table. And they've been particularly cruel. John Wick managed to off his the rivals, who were just local, I think, Russian gangsters in the first film, that killed his dog and stole his car. But after that, it's evolved into this huge mythology where Keanu has been on the death list for the Table. So they basically, there are entire rule sets in how you can behave. In the second film, he was obliged to murder one of his friends because he owed the person requesting it. And in the third one, we saw John Wick actually meet with the elder that oversees the whole organisation. And each film seems to have expanded this universe and kept a lot of the great characters in it, like Lawrence Fishburne and what's his face? I can't remember. Ian McShane. And Lance Reddick, who died. He dies at the start of John Wick 4, right at the start, by the way. So it's not really a spoiler, but he died in real life the week the film came out. So at the end of the last film, we had Ian McShane in the hotel that he owned, and he was about to lose because the Table said he was harbouring John Wick. At the end of it, John Wick was actually shot by the Ian McShane character and fell out of the building. and ended up with Lawrence Fishburne, who's like a mafia don of the sewers, like Danny DeVito in the second Batman film. And the obvious inference in this one, it was that Keanu was going to come back and seek revenge against the table. What they've done is actually magnificent, and the third film was very wide in its net, and its locations, its colour schemes. You know, we got the desert and everything. This one's really pared down to some nuts and bolts that make it the closest to the first film. I thought the second got a bit messy, and the third was a little bit messy, but much better in its sprawlingness. This is really honed in on a few elements, and some of them are really interesting, because we start with John Wick in the desert, riding horseback, a great sequence, and he murders the new elder. He kills him, which is about the biggest sin you can do in this universe. And what we see then is that everyone that has supported John Wick, even if it's a tacit, tiny amount, then is suffering payback from this high table, who decide to blow up Ian McShane's hotel as retribution for him once being friends with John Wick, who was an assassin in the old days, who retired, married a woman, and she died of cancer, and then he lived a solitary life until he was pulled back in that first film, when people killed his dog and stole his car. But now he's firmly back in the mould. I really like the way the setup shows his actions to be incredibly selfish. Lance Reddick's killed. We meet Bill Skarsgård as someone that's employed as a executioner come de facto leader for this high table organisation, in punishing all of these organisations that have helped John Wick. If they're part of this wider table, they suffer incredible, well, usually death, and in the case of New York, the hotel actually being blown up, to punish John Wick and to show that everyone else that if you harbour him or if you help him. So we get the New York version, but then we move to, I think, Tokyo, I'm not 100% sure, where we get Hiroko Sanada, Osaka, the manager. He's a really well-known actor as well. A lot of these actors you've seen in many films, and he's really well-known. In fact, what has he been in? The Last Samurai was probably the most famous Western film he's been in, but he's been in stuff like Mortal Kombat as well. His hotel is again attacked by this high table led by Bill Skarsgård, and everyone's butchered. And we meet Rina Sawayama, who is a British singer I haven't really raved about. She's done a couple of albums, and I didn't really like the first one, but she's a really interesting actor. And she's set up for the next film. So she's her dad is the guy I just mentioned. He gets killed as a result of harbouring John Wick. From that point on, John Wick finds out that if he rejoins his old Romany gypsy crime syndicate, which he'd left in, I think, John Wick 3, if he rejoins it, he can actually challenge Bill Skarsgård to a duel. And if he beats him in the duel, all bets are off. And that's the only way that he can actually restore balance and give Ian McShane his old life back as a manager of a hotel of assassins. So it's quite tightly wound around this, and honestly, this is superb. This is the main things that stand out here are it's the most beautiful action film this side of Fury Road. The visuals, the soundstage, and the music, which often leans heavily into French electro house, and a large part of the film is in Paris. The last entire, I think, hour and a half are in Paris. It's 3 hours long. It's nearly 3 hours long, which was quite surprising, but does not drag. The music is often brilliant, and we get there's a song used in it, Paint It Black, a version of Paint It Black, and another song before that, which really jolt you out of the mood they've created a bit. But we get Genesis by Justice, the French electro house duo, which just sounds fantastic in one of the many immortal action scenes. Keanu has pared back his dialogue to, I think, 350 words in this film. Someone worked out it's like $40,000 a word he got paid, which is, it works really well because he doesn't, instead of trying to emote more and more as this franchise has gone on, he's done it less and less. And that really works well here. So visually and sonically, this film is absolutely superb. There are a lot of long form sequences here. I would always pare down the length of these action sequences by at least a third. And I think you could apply that to almost every Hollywood action movie, particularly the MCU universe. They do end up going on a little bit too long. But many of these are state-of-the-art, absolute state-of-the-art action sequences. We go to what is, I think, supposed to be a famous techno nightclub in Berlin, and we get a fat suit wearing... Where is he? Is his name Sean Atkins? Who's another action star who comes up with a brilliant character. And that's one, probably next to how visually striking and sonically brilliant it is, the side characters are the best of the entire franchise. Donnie Yen, a legend of martial arts films, is superb as a kind of John Wick character. So Donnie Yen is famous for the Ip Man films and many other Western films where he's probably the most famous martial artist in American movies today. He's kind of like a John Wick character. He doesn't want anything to do with this anymore, but he can't get out. And they threaten his daughter's life unless he goes after John Wick. And he's like this unstoppable yet blind character. And it was really weird because it's exactly the same character he played in Rogue One, where he played that blind Jedi with a cane. It's the same character, but I thought his character here was brilliant, one of the best in the franchise. It took me 2 goes of watching this film to realise how good Bill Skarsgård is as a villain. I didn't like him when he played the clown in it, but he's brilliant here. He's not only a comic book villain, supervillain, but he's got this real sort of, like, his arrogance is tempered by the fear, and his eye starts winking when he knows that things aren't going well for him. I thought he was a brilliant character, very, very cruel, very intelligent, sociopathic, but also very self-aware. He's got a really good scene with Ian McShane in a gallery where he finds out that John Wick can legally challenge him to a one-on-one duel. And he goes through various emotions in that scene, including fear and, I guess, acceptance, but also when he sort of says to Ian McShane at the end, you don't realise that you go as well if John Wick dies. I thought that was, he's really good. We get Ian McShane and Lawrence Fishburne. They don't have massive roles here, but Ian McShane gets a good turn. And the Sean Atkins character, if it is indeed him, is great in a fat suit as a guy in this Berlin nightclub. The whole thing has numerous action sequences that would rank as good as any, but I felt like the final sort of half hour was arguably the pinnacle of everything that's happened so far. There's this sequence in the Champs-Élysées in Paris, which must have been a nightmare to shoot, which is very incredible, with John Wick spinning around them in a car, shooting everyone. There's so many great mythological aspects to the John Wick franchise, and one of them is the fact that it's hyper real in the fact that the public and the police can't see what they're doing. Even if it's in the middle of the Champs-Élysées, there's never been any police or military involved in this franchise. It's like it's all happening in plain view, but people ignore it. So even the general public have ignored the massive fights that are going on around them, and they're never really injured by anything that happens. I always loved that weirdness about it. But there's one scene here in the nightclub where the public actually realise what's going on. I wondered what that was for, because I think that's the only scene in all 4 films where the public are really engaged with their fighting. Most of the time it happens in a sea of people and no one pays any attention. And I've always loved that weird bit. But then once we go from the Champs-Élysées, we get this step sequence up to this beautiful church on a hill, which is one of the great action sequences. It's pared down to a really narrow view. It's got this pumping French electro house soundtrack. And it's got this real metaphorical aspect to it, like the legend of Sisyphus. If I said that right, the guy that's condemned to all eternity to push a boulder up a hill. John Wick has to climb all these steps before the time runs out, and he just gets up steps and falls all the way to the bottom, and it just happens over and over. And it's like, it's really funny, but the bone crunching is so bad. And his body goes through so much bone crunching in this film that I actually winced over and over as you find him reach the bottom of one set of steps and then bound, all the way down another and then another, and has to start again. And the final denouement is really low-key. I really don't like the way that a lot of the MCU films just went bigger and bigger on their battle sequences. This is the quietest scene, fewest people, least violence, and a wonderful denouement, which I didn't see coming, and I thought that the film earned. So John Wick 4, I think, is a masterpiece. I think it's superb. It's the best action film, not only looks and sound-wise since Fury Road, but also quality-wise. They've really done nothing that wrong in this whole 4-film sequence. And even though they make out that John Wick is passed on at the end, it's clear that they're doing John Wick 5, so we know that's not true. And I hope that's it. I hope that they give us one more film. This reminded me a bit of the end of Breaking Bad Series 4, in that he's done everything now. So when they said, there's one more series of Breaking Bad, I was like, where can you go? And they managed to make it go in such incredible places. But I really hope that they do here, because it felt like an endgame. It felt like that he'd achieved everything by the end of this one. So, a very easy 9 out of 10. I might even go higher. I'll stick with 9 out of 10. The only problems occasionally are the numerous fight sequences go on a bit long at times. But I don't think screenplay-wise there's a problem. I think it's never boring. I got to an hour and a half into this near 3-hour film, and they're nearly at the duel. And I thought, how can they pad this out so much longer? And an hour later, I was like, how did we get here? We're 2.5 hours in. It was brilliantly done. I don't know if 9's too low. I'm going to stick with 9 out of 10 for John Wick 4.